Great design means nothing if your drawings don't communicate. Today, I'll show you 5 visual guidelines that make your architectural plans instantly clearer and more professional. In this video, we'll break down 5 simple, repeatable principles for creating cleaner, more readable floor plans, focused on graphic hierarchy, consistency, and clear communication for everyone from clients to contractors. I'll show you how these visual guidelines help transform architectural drawings into something instantly understandable and professional. To demonstrate this, I'll be using Rayon Design, an all-in-one next generation tool for architects and interior designers. You can create a free Rayon account using the link below to follow along, and you'll also find free templates used in the walkthrough linked in the description. So let's get started. Number 1, establish a clear line hierarchy. A clear line hierarchy creates visual order, separating structure from furniture, background from focus, and intent from noise, so your drawing reads instantly and confidently. Let's start by looking at line weights. So you can see this scheme here, which is a simple residential cabin design. So you can see the solid areas are the walls, we've got windows, we've got doors, we have a series of patterns to show the surfaces, and then we have blocks, which are furniture pieces with a variety of different elements and people. Now, this is obviously made up of lots of different layers, and thinking about line weights, we need to think about the sort of hierarchy of different elements that we're showing. Let's just very quickly look at our layer system. So we've got annotations there, so that turns on and off all of our drawing elements. So those bits of added text, all of those elements which are in red. So let's turn those off and look at the main drawing. We've got shadows, which obviously help the drawing sort of pop out, so give it some depth and three-dimensionality to it. We have our walls, so our walls and our windows and our doors are all contained within the same layer. And then we have our furniture and our fills, so that has all of those sort of added elements that bring the drawing to life. So things like the wardrobes, the floor finishes, the baths, and the beds. And then we have sort of additional landscape topography around there. So obviously when we're putting this drawing together, we want to be thinking about what are those things that want to show as solid, what are those things that want to show strongly, and what are those things that want to show a bit more lightly. So the first thing would be to make the wall thicknesses nice and strong. So that's obviously because you're cutting through the walls, you want them to have some element of solidity. So all the elements, so the walls, the doors, the windows, they're all referenced through styles. So styles are on the left hand side here, and they basically contain the information about the visual appearance of all these different elements. So you can see here, if I click on walls, this wall has a style, so it's a grey 0.3 meters. So this contains information about its properties, so how thick it is, what the finish is, how it appears in the drawing. So I can go into there and I can edit that style. So I could make the whole wall one solid black. You can see that those internal walls don't change because they're not the same style. So obviously if you're looking at that drawing, it's very clear which elements are the solid elements. So we could do exactly the same with the thinner walls, and that could be a black line. So there it gives the drawing a hierarchy already. It's a very clear distinction between solid and void. We can then think about things like the windows and doors. So again, you're cutting through them, so they should have some thickness to them, but they're much lighter elements. So if we go into each block, so that's what a door or a window is, it's a block family. So I can go into that block and I can look at the styles which have been used here. So again, we have our style. I can go in and edit that style. It gives me a line, so I could change the line color and I could change the line thickness. So at the moment it's shown as something very thin, so I could up that thickness and say, for example, I wanted to change the swing, so I could add a dash to that line, for example, which accentuates the temporary nature of the door. And I can change the scale of that dash. Again, I can change the thickness of the line, and I can change the color. So you can see there. The other thing to bear in mind is the view scale. So at the moment we've got a stroke scale set at 1 to 40. So if we were trying to imagine what this drawing might look like at 1 to 100, we could change that scale, and then our drawing line thicknesses will be updated to show that. So I'll pop it back to 1 to 40. And I can do exactly the same thing with any of the blocks. So you can see in here, I can change the types that are related to those. I can change the thicknesses, and I can do that in any of the block families that exist. So you can see there, the drawing is already starting to really show that depth. So we can do exactly the same thing with the people. So you can see here the blocks themselves, the outline of the block is thicker and the detail elements within the block are thinner. And then you can see within the fill, so the patterns that are created, they're a lighter shade. So again, I could go into here. Again, I can edit the style. I can go into my hatch and I can change the stroke color of the hatch. I think the mid-grey works quite well actually. But you get the idea, is that we can have a hierarchy of different line weights that help illustrate the drawing and can communicate the ideas much clearer. And when you're going through the effort of creating these different styles, you can save them and you can share them amongst your team and your colleagues. So I could set a standard way that I like to present my drawings, and I could set that as a standard within my office. So all of those users that are using Rayon, they can follow those styles. So as I showed you before, say I was creating a new wall, for example. Let's just do a little test here. If I say save style, I can call that wall A. I can set the thicknesses, so you could have certain maybe feasibility type projects where you're using an estimated thickness for a wall, and I can go into there. I can then change the fill type, so I can add colors, I can add a gradient, even a texture, or a hatch. So I could have a diagonal hatch that sits as standard, and I can change the thickness of the outline of the wall and change the thickness or tone of the hatch itself. And then you will see that in our styles library, if you scroll down to walls, we have our wall A. So that will sit within that library, and that library can be shared. So to share a library, we go up to share, go to libraries, and you can see here there's publish styles. So those styles can be shared with other people, with your other teammates. You can even create your own custom blocks and share those as well. The really great thing is anything that's been painted with this style, once I go in and update it, so I could go in and say, oh, actually I want the outline to be orange, I can edit that from that style library. So if I had multiple drawings on a canvas that had all of the walls related to this style, I would only need to adjust the style one place and that would update everything else. And similarly, if we jump to the annotations layer, for example, so let's turn those back on, you can see all of our annotations are red. So I could go back into the style library, I could change those from red to black to grey to whatever colour I felt like, and that would update everything itself. Similarly, I could change the line types, for example. So, the scale of the lines, the thickness of the grid lines, for example. I can go in here, the thickness of those, and I can save those as grid line, for example. So, say on every drawing that you create, you want to have your grid consistent, we could just save a gridland style, and then that would come into our line styles within here, which you can see there. So again, I could edit it from the style library and say, actually I don't want it to be red, I want it to be green. And you can see that. And for me, that's the really powerful thing about Rayon, is that all these visual communicative aspects of the drawing aren't afterthoughts. They're all part of the process. They're all part of you thinking how you want to communicate that, how you want to display that hierarchy. And you can very easily clearly see that within the drawing yourself. Number 2, manage fills and hatches for clarity. Thoughtful use of fills and hatches prevents visual clutter and clearly communicates materiality, depth and spatial hierarchy, especially as drawings become more detailed. Now let's dive into hatches. So here's another example project. So this is a small apartment project, which you can see here. There are a number of hatches that sit within this drawing. So you can see here we have flooring finishes for a living bedroom space, a diamond type tile for the bathroom, a larger format tile for the kitchen, and then an external patio type fill. Even the drawing itself has got a hatch to it, so this square has a fill which is a hatch of some sort. And similarly, if we look down at the rest of the drawings, we have more of a rendered finish. So just like we have the very sort of diagrammatic hatch here, we have a more sort of pictorial hatch in these images. So again, we have the sort of timber chevron, we have the diamond tile, the larger format tile, and then the external patio area. And we even have a key that sits alongside that. Now, both these types of hatches and patterns are made in exactly the same way. So to actually make a hatch, so we can either have a shape that has a fill. So really they are just different types of fills. So if we go into the fill menu here, we can have a solid color fill. So that can be obviously whatever color we want. We can have a hex code and we can change the opacity of that fill itself. We can have a gradient, so we can change 2 of the colors. So we can have a gradient on there. We can have a texture. So those are those sort of photographic type images which are repeating. So we have a library of different textures, so things from tiles, bricks, timber, flooring, outdoor things. So we have a sort of fixed library there, but you can also add your own, which I'll show you to do in a second. And then we have a hatch, and those are more sort of diagrammatic things. So line hatches, things that you might use in your more traditional drawings. And they can be things from floor finishes, brick patterns, shingles, or things you might use in detailing. So things like oblique lines and vertical and diamond lines. And again, just like all of our styles, we can set these. We can change the color of the hatch itself. We can even change the line thickness of the individual element as well. We can even do things like scale it. So I can scale the hatch. I can rotate the hatch. So say I wanted a more sort of random pattern, and I can even offset the hatch within that frame. And once you've got the hatch exactly how you want it, you can save it as a style. So just like when we were looking at the line styles, you can save that as a hatch style. So we'll call that stones hatch, for example. And I'll just show you the style library. And you can see on this side, we have the style library, stones hatches there. So again, any element which is filled with that hatch, I could then go in afterwards and I could change it and say, oh, actually that wants to be a red hatch. And that would update all elements of that drawing. I can even go in and change all of those things that I showed you before. So, change the scale, change the rotation, change the line thickness. And you'll notice there the container, so what it sits in, the shape, if you like, that also has a line style as well. So I can remove that stroke edge if I wanted to, and it just shows up the hatch. And that will obviously change with whatever shape I have. I could make a circle with that, and I could make a polyline with that. And if I want to pick up that style, so the red one, all I need to do is use the picker tool, and that will pick up that style. Even these themselves, this is just a shape with a fill. So I could even go in and change that to that same hatch. Probably wouldn't want stones indoors, but who knows? And exactly the same things with these more sort of photographic representations. So if we took this hatch, the chevron timber hatch, for example, so we've got herringbone PNG texture. So we can go in there, I can see this. So we have a fill. So I can edit that texture itself. So I could change the colors, I could increase the contrast, the saturation. So say that wasn't just how you liked the pattern, but not the tone. So we can change that, and that will update there. Similarly, I can do exactly the same things that I was doing before. So I can change the size, I can rotate it, I can offset it, all of those things. And you'll see in the style, let's give it a name, we'll call it timber texture, and you'll see that pop up there. And again, I can go in from the style side and I can do whatever I like with it. And again, that will update wherever I go. Now, what about if you wanted to create your own? So again, and as before, if I was to create new elements, so a circle, a polyline, even if I have a wall that I want to contain a space, if we just make this a simple solid fill wall, I can use the bucket tool, which is down here, so bucket, and I can fill that, and then I can change that fill to that. So I can use the bucket tool very easily to fill elements between different surfaces. And exactly the same with these two shapes. I can pick a style and I can change those. And then if I went back in here and I said, actually, I'm not sure about that one, I want to go back to the original, all of those update. Okay, but what about if you wanted to make your own pattern? So let's try that. So let's just fill this shape, for example, and I will go to add a fill. So I can go to texture, which is where those sort of image patterns were coming from, and I can upload my own. So I've got this example texture here, which is a vertical timber, and you can see there it loads that into a pattern, and I can do exactly the same thing I was doing before. I can change that, I can change the rotation, and I can even change the color. I want something a little bit grayer. Yeah, that looks good. So I can save that as a style, and I can call it external decking, for example. I might remove the outside stroke, and then I can do pick a style, and that will be updated on whatever I say. And then in that instance, I might say, oh, actually the scale's not quite right. So I can find my external decking in here. I can go to transform, and I can say, oh, actually maybe the scale of, yeah, that looks a lot better. So that gets updated. Obviously it's updated on that one because that's where we were using it. But that's that. And once you start exploring, you'll start to decide when it's right to have different types of styles in different types of drawings. So for this type of drawing, for example, so we have different types of drawings here. So one is about furniture, one is about electrical and lighting, one is about construction, and one's about the floor covering. So, in this type of drawing, a very visual thing that shows you the pattern, that shows you the tones, how those things interact. Having a very visual thing with all of these patterns is perfect. Whereas that probably wouldn't work. It would be far too cluttered for an electric and lighting plan. So you need to then start thinking about how you'll bring in these textures, tones, patterns in to help you communicate. It's always going back to communication. What are we trying to communicate with each drawing? And on this one, it's about the lighting. On this one, it's about the furniture. And on this one, it's about the floor covering. So you're suiting your purpose perfectly, all with the tools that Rayon are giving you. Number 3, use blocks to standardize furniture and symbols. A strong block system ensures furniture and symbols read correctly in scale, style, and hierarchy, creating consistent, accurate drawings whilst dramatically speeding up your workflow. Now on to CAD blocks. So Rayon has got an extensive CAD block library, which really helps the process of layout, planning, everything that you could want is in this block library. To access it, you have the block library on the left-hand side, and you can see here that if we go to libraries, we have all of Rayon's standard libraries. So things from title blocks, animals, basic elements, bathrooms, dining rooms, kitchens, windows, hospital treatment rooms, anything you can think of, there is an element for you within the Rayon block library. And if we look at this example drawing set here for an urban loft, you can see a lot of those blocks already in the plan. So we can see things from furniture layout. So this is one, fixed layout with all of these different elements in it. Cooktops and chairs and tables, planting, even people in plan, bathrooms, doors, windows, all of those elements are blocks that are placed into the model. And we even have those things in plan, section, and in elevation. So the same library will have these elements that you see in plan down here. So you can see this kitchen element in section there. That's the same block, just with a different view. So let's take, one of these kitchen units, for example. You can see on the right side, it tells you what this block is. The block itself can have properties. So there are lots of different tutorial videos on Rayon that go into different properties that different blocks can have. But you can see here, if I click on it, we also have top and side views. So I know that if I use this cabinet in elevation, for example, I can also have the plan view as well. And that's perfect because then when I look a different way at a drawing, I know that they're aligned, they're the same style, they're the same shape. All of those things are pre-built. And just like before, when we mentioned, we can change the style of these things. So if I go into here, I can change the different line styles which are created. these can have different fills. So anything that's pasted with that style will be updated. You saw all of those different elements update. I can even change the line style to make this a different dash, for example. You can see that there. And then when I reuse that, those style preferences will stay the same. But what about if I wanted to add something new from the library? So say here, for example, some more kitchen elements. So I can add some more plates and bowls if I wanted to. So that comes in to scale, and it's easy to just drag and drop into the drawing. Obviously I can edit, I can rotate those things. If I want to, I can scale them. And again, I can go in there and I can change the line styles, the fill styles, which are related to those things. So doors and windows are blocks in themselves. So when we want to host a door or a window in a wall, we go to opening. So this will allow us to choose a block from the library. So say we just go with a standard door here, I'll select that, and then that will automatically, hug to my wall elements. So we wanted a door here, for example. I can change the swing of the door, and that will be hosted in the wall. I can then, move that about as my heart's content. And I can also go in, I can change those line styles as before. I can add a dash, for example. And again, those will all live within my block library. Rayon also has things called parametric blocks. So if you're looking through the block library, for example, so if we go to, basic blocks, we can find a parametric block, and these are all signified by this little shape here. So for example, we could bring in this corner sofa, so that just drags in. So obviously I can do things like rotate it, but you'll see these little sliders here, and that allows me to adjust the block itself. So rather than stretching the whole thing to fit, I can adjust these elements, make them longer or shorter, make it fatter or thinner, exactly the same thing. So it fits with my design intent, it fits within the space, and it doesn't lose that overall proportion that you want. And that is, a variety of different elements, from things like doors, windows, stoves, tables, for example. So here, the parametric nature of the block, as the table increases, it populates the chairs. That's really smart. So I can adjust those things and make my furniture fit how I like without getting into the realms of just stretching things so they're not accurate. The other things you can do with regards to blocks is import blocks. So you can import things like product vendors DWGs or PDFs and have those within your block library. So if you have particular furniture blocks that you like to use, or you're migrating from AutoCAD, for example, the really cool tool within Rayon is the AI block creator. So say, for example, I have this very lovely mid-century sideboard, for example, that I want to place under the TV here. I can download that image, so upload that file to the AI chat, which sits on the left side here, and I can say generate a product. So here it says turn a product, image, or simple prompt into a CAD block. So I'll click that, and then I'll press send. And that's going to be doing a number of things. So you can see there, it's removing the background, it's generating an object representation, it's going to be drawing the top, the side, and the front views, and then it's going to be estimating the dimensions. So hopefully it will come in as a finalized block to scale and represents that image that we want. There we go. So it's generated the top, the side, and the front view of the sideboard, and I can download that, or I can import each view as I see fit. So for example, I can at my top view, obviously from the top it's not much to look at, but from the front, from the side, you'll see that those things align. I can also go in here, I can change the line style, so I could say actually sort of mid-grey color would be good. I could even go in and fill it, for example. So again, I can use that bucket tool, and I could give that a texture, a tone, a hatch, a color. whatever I see fit. So that means that when you're designing your spaces and a client wants a particular piece of furniture or has existing furniture that they want represented in the drawings, Rayon solves that problem for you. And just like we can share our style library, we can also share our block library. So as I said before, our block library is here. Any of the elements that we've created, we've edited, we can then go to share, we go to libraries, and we can publish the block. So I just slide that little toggle, and then that will allow me to share that block library with other drawings, with other members of my team. Number 4, add professional annotations and graphic elements. Graphic elements like dimensions, tags, and scale bars give drawings technical credibility and construction clarity. A strong approach is using a monochromatic base with a single accent color, such as red or orange, to highlight key information. I'm back on the Urban Loft project, and I want to talk to you about annotations. So obviously one really striking element about these drawings are the bright orange annotations, and this is done for clarity. Obviously, when the rest of the background drawing is monochrome, having something with a bit of colour really helps that clarity element. It helps the drawing sort of pop. So whether this is a sort of red, an orange, a bright green, a colour that really, cuts through and shows those key elements of information that doesn't get confused with other lines. So you can see here all of those elements with the orange tone, so things like the titles of the drawings, materials, annotations, styles, section lines, dimensions, even areas, and spot heights. These can all be custom coloured. They could even match your branding if you wanted to. But it all serves a purpose. It's there to help communicate those key elements of the drawing. And you can see that's used through this drawing set for things like grid lines as well. Even things like the electrical and lighting plan is in that colour, and that really helps that clarity. It sits above this sort of monochromatic background and makes that really clear. Even things like these pop outs, different hatches, different symbols, all sort of highlighting, that additional layer of information through those annotations. The annotation styles in themselves are quite simple. So again, we have the style library. So we have text styles. So just like we have wall styles and fill styles, we have text styles as well. And you can see there that this text style, I can call that body text orange, for example, which you can see down here. And within that, I can change the color, I can change the size, I can change the font. I can even give that text properties. So just like with the blocks, just like the other styles, we can set up a standard text, a standard font, a standard size that you want to continue through all of your drawings. And similarly with things like these lines. So, the grid lines themselves, this can be a line style in itself. So if I save that style and I call it grid line, I know that any line which is pasted with that grid line style will be the same. It will be consistent across all of my drawing types. And all the elements that you can see, so things like the little tag windows, the spot heights, the section markers, the tags, these are all elements or blocks that are built into Rayon. So just like with our styles, and we'll go back to our block library. So we've got title blocks and annotations. So you can see here, we already have these things like elevation markers, section cuts, north points, all these different elements that you're used to seeing on architectural drawings, they're already pre-built. The great one is having the title blocks already pre-built, so you can just drag and drop those. You can edit your own title block, or you can create your own custom one. You can make sure it sizes properly. You can add colors, you can add your company information, for example, and you can share that library across your multiple projects so everything is consistent. So, even here, for example, I can drag these in. I can make sure that they're to scale, how I want them to appear, and I can go in there and I can change that style, for example, and I can make this a bright color, just as I've been saying. We can make this a bright orange. Exactly the same with the text. I can even pick a text style. I can even change the text colors. There we go. And obviously, because that's a block, I can copy copy and paste that where I want it, I can scale it, and then I can reuse it across my projects. One of the key pieces of advice when you're thinking about annotations is about separating them out. So I always like to put them on different layers. So you'll see here that we have an annotation layer. You can see that in this example, for example, we have all of those annotations. So things like grid lines, dimensions, notes, areas, spot heights, section lines, window and door tags. All of these elements, basically the orange elements, are all sitting, within the annotation layer. But what about if we wanted to dimension this plan, for example? So let me just quickly add a new layer, and we'll call that dimensions. Make sure that that's above, so that's sitting above the drawing. And I'll show you the dimension tool. So the dimension tool here, so externally, so the dimension tool here, so externally I can click, and then drag out. So I can create my own custom annotation type. So I can change the font, I can change the font size, make something nice and clear. I can change my stroke. So I think having the stroke as orange as well is quite nice. I can have extensions. So again, I can change the color of those. I can change the line weight here. So you can see those bits there. So I can go in there and I can say maybe a 5 dash. I can change the end. So I could change that from the diagonal to an arrow. Extensions are a bit. Okay, maybe the line weight needs to go up slightly. 1.8. Maybe the arrows can get a bit bigger. 0.1. 0.1. And then I can save that as a style. So I can call that dimension A. And then you'll see here in my style library, if I scroll down to the bottom, now we have dimension A. And again, I can go in afterwards and adjust those if I see fit. So I can then go through and dimension my drawing. And obviously similar to AutoCAD, I've got a single dimension or I've got a chained dimension. So let's just delete that one for a second. We could do a chained dimension and I can go 1, 2, and that will continue to add dimensions as I click. And obviously there's a bit of an art to adding dimensions, so dimensioning off of key elements, not over dimensioning the drawing, not over constraining elements, dimensioning the things that actually matter to you as an architect, or make the space how you envisioning it. So if I was doing this, I wouldn't be dimensioning the furniture, I'd be dimensioning the built elements, the clear areas that I need to do. And dimensions are different to different people. So if you're creating a construction drawing, your dimensioning will be different because you'll be talking about setting out. So setting out from grid lines, things like that. Whereas if I'm dimensioning a plan for a end user, they just want to understand how big their space is. It's a much simpler process. So obviously we can do that. We can dimension key elements within the space. Sometimes when you're creating a chain, it's helpful to alternate the dimensions, and similarly I like to keep them out of the way, so up in the top left or right corners of the drawing so they don't dominate the drawing too much. And then we can change those levels by turning them on and off. So we've got our proposed dimensions, we've got our original annotations, so all of those elements that we showed previously. And hopefully you can see that having these bright colours on this monochrome drawing background works really well. Number 5, harness AI to support faster visualization. The first 4 guidelines ensure your drawings are clear, professional and buildable, but great drawings also need to communicate feeling. Rayon's built-in AI tools help bring your designs to life instantly, without adding time or complexity to your workflows. Now let's have some fun with the AI tool. So I'm still back in my drawing of the 2-story loft, and I want to have a look at this section. So this is a section through the building. Now, what I've done is to turn the annotations off, so to clear the drawing back. So you can see that. And now I want to go into the AI chat. So what I want to do is create an axonometric view from this 2D section. So To start with, I will do add screenshot. So just on that little plus tool, there's add screenshot. I'll create a frame around my section. So that basically takes a snapshot of that section. And then I'll go into tools. So we can do a number of workflows already set up within the tool. So there's generate image, generate tracing, generate product, stylize. So you can have different types of styles. Or generate axonometric. So create an axonometric view from a scene's floor plan or section. That's what we want to do. So this will be looking at that section and trying to extrapolate a 3D form out of it and present it in an axonometric fashion. Look at that. So you can see the preview here. So this just opens up another window. So you can see its understanding of the gallery, of the dressing space, of the kitchen. I mean, it's made a slightly strange choice with the stairs. But we can go from there. So what I can do now is insert that in. So you can see there, I could even make, another page that explores those ideas in 3D. And with that image, I can adjust that image as well. So I can do things like edit, I can upscale it, I can remove the background. So for example, let's just remove the background here. So you can see that that gets rid of the white border around it. Now, why don't we try reusing that image? So I can click on that image and I can say reference in the chat. So that will then be re-looking at that image that's just been created. And I could stylize it, for example. So why don't we try a clay model? So that will then be looking at that line drawing and trying to, imagine it as a clay model. Wow, there we go. So again, we can preview that and we can insert it. So I just want to remove the background again, and we can have that next to the original, and you can see how it's kept the exact geometry, but it's imagined the drawing very differently. I think that looks great. And then why not try another version? So again, we can do reference in the chat. I can go to tools, I can go to stylize, and I can say render. So this will then be trying to create a realistic version. So again, I can do exactly the same thing. I can remove the background. And now we have three very quickly to make imaginations of this space. We could even try something like make this a wood textured model. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I think that's even better. And really with this, you can keep experimenting. So we've got those sort of spaces explored in 3 different ways, all from one flat on elevation section. Now, let's go full circle and export our drawings. Once your drawing is clear and resolved, exporting should be seamless. In Rayon, you move directly from drawing to presentation without switching tools or breaking your workflow. Okay, so with those elements drawn and the annotations added and the drawings looking great, we can now look at exporting them. So you can export things in a number of different ways. So in the traditional way, so exporting a PDF or a PNG, so we can go up to the menu, we can go to export, we can export an image, PDF, DWG, or even a Rayon file if you're transferring it between different teams. So if it's an image, I can select my page. So you'll notice here that each of my sheets has got a page number. So why don't we try page 5? So this has my section and elevation on. Now I can change the name. I can change the format, so I can change it from a PDF, the resolution, a PNG, the quality, and I can decide whether the stroke scale is per page or per screen. So obviously per page, it will be scaled correctly for the scale of your sheet. For screen, it basically scales it how you see it. So I tend to go for page, and that means that everything is coming out lovely and crisp. I can save that where I want and go from there. Similarly, I can do exactly the same thing with PDF. So again, I can do PDF, I can choose a sheet, page 6 for example, and again I can change the name, the image quality, and I can change the stroke scale. Again, I can choose the location and the file name. If everything's looking good, so you can obviously export your PDFs, your PNGs, but the real power of Rayon is in the sharing. So let me show you that. So if we go up to the right, we have our share button. And just as we can share our library, so we can share our styles and our blocks that I showed you previously, we can also share our presentation. So rather than having to export PDFs, collate them, download them, and then upload them to a file transfer site and send your client a link, we can do all of that just by sliding this one toggle. So this will publish our presentation to a link. So I can copy that link to an email to send my client, or I can just open it. And here it will be loading the presentation. And you can see here, it has all the different pages from the variety of different images and pages that we've created. All of the line weights are nice and refined. Everything's looking good. You can see there the drawing we created with the annotations, the section and elevations, those AI visuals that we created, all on drawing sheets, all looking good. And that's all just from one link. And the really great thing is that if we change anything, so say for example, I went in here, I said, oh, these are a bit big on the page. Maybe I'll have two smaller ones and this one bigger one over here, for example, and added a few titles or something like that. I can then go back into the share and I can press update, that little spinner. I'll press update, publish now. Again, I can then go back in and open that. And you'll see there, my updated drawing is there. So that's all within the same link. So the client isn't actually having to, download things multiple times. They're always going to have the latest as long as you've updated it on there. Perfect. Clear drawings don't happen by accident. They're built through simple, consistent visual decisions. And these 5 guidelines should build a solid foundation that you can use on every project. Try it out for yourself. You'll find a free Rayon account and the template that we use linked below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.